Aboard a transport ship heading to a frozen planet plagued by civil war, Anakin Skywalker was on his way to yet another mission in the Clone Wars. The winds of the Force blew strangely that day, but not even the young Jedi Knight's sharp instincts were enough to foresee what was coming. During the hyperspace crossing, the ship was suddenly attacked by bounty hunters working for separatist remnants. Upon identifying Anakin's presence, they decided they could not miss the opportunity to capture the Chosen One and exchange him for future advantages. Anakin was outnumbered, and their ship had a powerful tractor beam, which forced him into combat. The young Skywalker gave it his all, destroying more than 30 droids and taking down over 10 enemy pirates, but their numbers were enough to strike the Jedi with a blaster shot. Wounded in battle and unconscious, Skywalker was frozen in carbonite before he could even react. At the Jedi Temple, Anakin's absence was felt like a deep wound. The mission was supposed to be brief, and the prolonged silence alarmed the Council. Mace Windu was the first to raise suspicions. With his pragmatic and distrustful perspective, the sudden disappearance of such a valuable Jedi could only be the result of a political maneuver. And Palpatine, increasingly influential, was the main suspect. Yoda, more introspective, believed that the Force might be guiding Anakin's destiny away from visible paths. Obi-Wan, for his part, refused to accept any hypothesis of loss. He threw himself into increasingly dangerous missions, trying to find or at least explain the disappearance of his former Padawan. Without Skywalker, Palpatine's game gained new momentum. With the Jedi scattered on secondary tasks such as searching for Anakin, he intensified ties with General Grievous and Count Dooku. The trust in Dooku, however, was false. Palpatine was merely buying time. Coldly, he accelerated preparations for Order 66, manipulating the Senate and the military while waiting for the right moment to overturn every board. With Anakin out of the way and unable to intervene or threaten his plans, the path was clear. And when the time came, the galaxy was swallowed by the shadow of a new empire. The clones attacked cruelly and mercilessly. Meanwhile, Padme Amidala refused to accept Anakin's loss. Taking silent risks and using her most loyal contacts in the Senate, she began her own investigation. With the help of Bail Organa, she traced the last transmissions of the missing ship and identified the coordinates of a damaged freighter. She traveled to the outskirts of that remote system, where she was nearly captured by Imperial agents also investigating the area. Saved by Obi-Wan at the last moment, the senators saw her hope collapse. The absence of concrete answers, coupled with the rising danger, led her to withdraw from politics. In silence, Padme began to live a discreet life, trying to cope with the void of absence and the constant fear that something much worse had happened. Decades seemed to have passed, but for Anakin, time was only darkness. Frozen in carbonite, his body lay dormant, but the Force still whispered in his dreams. The group of pirates, seeking easy profits, tried to sell him to collectors of rare artifacts. However, upon arriving on a planet inhabited by exotic beings of unclear intentions, the deal got out of control. Curious and reckless, the buyers released the prisoner without understanding what they were doing. Upon waking, Anakin was seized by a primal survival instinct. Confused, weakened, and surrounded by aggressive creatures, he responded with a Force outburst. The explosion of power knocked down the beings around him, and even while staggering, he managed to take control of the situation. In a short time, he mastered the place, using his connection with the Force to understand where he was and what had happened. The truth, however, hit him like a fatal blow. He discovered that the war had ended, the Jedi were extinct, and Palpatine ruled as absolute emperor. The galaxy he had sworn to protect had been subdued without him lifting a finger. Padme, Obi-Wan, the Jedi Council, they were all out of his reach. More than that, the weight of guilt crushed him. He, the Chosen One, was not present at the decisive moment. He had allowed, even if involuntarily, the darkness to triumph. Isolated on that hostile world, Anakin didn't know whether he should seek redemption, vengeance, or simply surrender to grief. But the Force had not abandoned him. Within him, a flame began to rekindle, fueled by a mix of pain, anger, and purpose. For weeks he meditated in the desert fields of the planet where he found himself. Every memory caused spasms. Ahsoka's laughter, Obi-Wan's advice, Padme's gaze. The Force seemed more alive within him than ever before, as if the years in suspension had awakened a new awareness. His powers were enhanced, but his soul was in tatters. Still, he began to plan his next move. It wouldn't be easy to return to a galaxy where everyone he knew had been attacked and which was now ruled by corruption. But there was no other choice. He needed to understand what remained. He needed to find answers. He began by hunting space pirates. They were the first to experience his new fury. Anakin hunted them down one by one, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. He needed a new ship, equipment, information. Each confrontation revealed more of the change in his demeanor. Less impulsive, more precise. Also, darker. The absence of a Jedi code allowed him to act with unsettling freedom, though he didn't fully give in to rage. It was as if he walked along an invisible border, still undecided between light and darkness. Reports of a powerful being resurfacing from nowhere began to spread through the far corners of the galaxy. In the absence of official records, the Empire disregarded any rumors about Jedi survivors. Palpatine had cleansed the archives, hunted the last members of the Order, and replaced the truth with propaganda. However, in forgotten corners, voices rose. Oppressed people spoke of a warrior who had emerged from the shadows, defeating space pirates, liberating colonies, and vanishing as quickly as he appeared. The whispers grew, but were not yet enough to threaten the Empire. Anakin knew that, to make a difference, he would need to reappear at the center of the galaxy. But first, he needed to understand who he was now. A reborn Jedi or a lone force of justice? Anakin returned to Coruscant under the cover of night, cloaked in darkness and the silence of someone who had died to the world. The corridors of the galactic capital looked different, the lights seemed colder, and the atmosphere more oppressive. He infiltrated Padmé's old quarters with the help of discreet contacts from Bail Organa, and upon seeing her for the first time in years, his heart pounded. Padmé hesitated, unable to believe her own eyes. When they finally touched, words burst into tears. Between sobs, Padmé told him everything, how the Senate had bowed, how hope had died. Anakin listened silently to the account of a world that had collapsed in his absence, and more terrible still, he learned that his name had been used by the Empire as a symbol of betrayal, declared dead as a Jedi deserter. Consumed by anguish, Anakin decided to search for Obi-Wan Kenobi. He combed through records, spied on coded transmissions, and followed rumors that led him to the edge of a system occupied by an Imperial base. There, he discovered that his former master operated from the shadows, protecting civilians threatened by a new military complex. Upon arrival, he found the people being brutally repressed during a peaceful protest. Without hesitation, Anakin advanced, slicing through the Imperial troops with merciless blows from his lightsaber. The soldiers, caught off guard, barely reacted to the fury unleashed upon them. Amid the chaos, a familiar figure emerged. It was Obi-Wan. The reunion happened in silence, on the battlefield, among bodies and smoke. They looked at each other, not as master and apprentice, but as brothers surviving a world that had rejected them. With trust restored between them, the two Jedi decided to act. They infiltrated Mustafar, where the Empire maintained a secret base of historical and military archives. The journey was risky, facing off against security droids and automated defense systems. Inside the complex, they found ancient records of Order 66, encrypted videos, and classified documents. Among them was the most valuable of all, a recording of Palpatine, still as Chancellor, issuing direct orders for the clones to execute the Jedi. The material was clear, undeniable, and proved that the Empire had been born from a coup d'état orchestrated by Darth Sidious. With the help of Bail Organa, the files were transmitted to several rebel cells scattered throughout the galaxy, igniting a blaze of rebellion across numerous worlds. The Imperial response was immediate, but the Jedi were prepared. Using Anakin's vast strategic knowledge, they launched an offensive against the Empire's communication and tracking systems. With surgical and coordinated strikes, they destroyed data centers and transmission towers. The assaults crippled central control, preventing the tracking of rebel ships and hindering the mobilization of Imperial troops. Planets like Naboo, Alderaan, and Kashyyyk took advantage of the disarray to rise up, and rebellions erupted like flames in dry straw. The once unified Empire now trembled before a network of synchronized uprisings. Surrounded by the chaos he had helped create, Palpatine was forced to act personally. He summoned the Senate for an emergency address, broadcast live to the entire galaxy. In the vast chamber, before thousands of representatives, the Emperor promised stability and strength. But before he could finish, the doors burst open. Anakin and Obi-Wan appeared at the center, like shadows from the past returning to demand justice. Without warning, they activated a holographic projector, displaying recordings of Palpatine as Darth Sidious. The Senate plunged into absolute silence, followed by cries of horror and outrage. Cornered, Palpatine revealed his yellow eyes of hatred and unleashed a wave of lightning against the two Jedi. The initial shock threw Obi-Wan against a column, but Anakin blocked the second blast with his lightsaber, advancing through the explosions with years of pent-up rage. Obi-Wan recovered and joined the fight. The chamber turned into a battlefield. Palpatine floated, hurling lightning and slashing everything in his path with his red saber, while Anakin and Kenobi alternated in attacks with leaps, spins, and precise strikes. At one point, Anakin disarmed the Emperor with a spinning kick, and Obi-Wan hurled the old Sith against the podium with a force push. But the fight didn't end there. Palpatine tried to rise, staggering, when Anakin simply knocked him down with a direct punch to the chin. Obi-Wan then kicked the saber away and, before the tyrant could react, immobilized him with the Force. Still trying to spit threats, the old Emperor took another kick to the ribs. "That's for the Jedi Masters you killed," said Kenobi. Anakin raised an eyebrow. "And this one's for calling me a traitor." A fresh punch silenced Palpatine. It was a scene as absurd as it was triumphant, the most feared being in the galaxy getting beaten on the ground like a stubborn old man. The Senate session, in shock, watched the fall of the tyrant live. With Palpatine subdued, his inert body being dragged away under silent protests, the Senate had no choice. The moral collapse of the Empire was complete. Planetary leaders demanded elections, the suspension of emergency laws, and a return to democracy. Padme resumed leadership in the Senate as a symbol of renewal. With the help of surviving Jedi and leaders like Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, the reconstruction of the galaxy began. The new republic was born from the public shame of an empire built on lies and oppression. The defeated face of Palpatine was archived as an eternal warning. Anakin, even as the hero of the moment, chose not to assume any formal position. He acknowledged the burden of his absence and the weight he still carried. But he stayed close, a silent guardian of the new order. Obi-Wan, for his part, began secretly training new Force sensitives, planting the seeds of a future Jedi generation. Both knew the galaxy was far from safe. The shadow left by Sidious would be long, but they had opened a new path, and this time, they were ready to defend it to the end. The rebuilding was slow, marked by fragile alliances and constant attempts to sabotage the new structure. But there was hope. Padme's figure as Chancellor, alongside respected leaders, served as a pillar. Transparency became law, and the Empire's secret files were opened so that darkness could never again hide behind bureaucracy. The memory of the Senate fight, the public fall of the tyrant and the battle that followed, became a symbol of truth's victory over fear. The old ghosts still haunted the edges of the galaxy, but now there was enough light to face them. And thus, from a galaxy once plunged into darkness, a new tomorrow emerged. The return of Anakin Skywalker was not just the rescue of a warrior, but the reclaiming of a destiny. The Chosen One had finally fulfilled his prophecy, not as a lone savior, but as part of something greater. Alongside those who still believed, he had restored balance. And this time, the Force was at peace.